All right, so question number 3 says that we have an airplane 30 miles northeast from the airport. If the angle of depression from the plane to the airport runway is 32.5 degrees, then what is the plane's altitude? So altitude is always your height, and that is connected to altitude is the height, and it's always connected to right angle. So the airplane is northeast. So I'm going to say the airplane is here. And we have our airport is here. Angle of depression is at 32.5. So that is here. And it's 30 miles northeast. So that's my hypotenuse because it has 2 directions. Not just north, not just east, but northeast. So that 30 would go here. Altitude is the height, and that is this x. Go ahead and solve for x. Set up your proportion. Figure out what ratio you're going to use. Is that a sine, cosine, or tangent? So take a minute, see if you can figure out what ratio would apply. So this is your hypotenuse, and is x opposite or adjacent? Opposite. So what trig ratio uses opposite and hypotenuse? Which one would you use? Sine. Yep. So you have the sine of 32.5 degrees equals opposite over hypotenuse. Go ahead and cross multiply and solve that for x. So we cross multiplied, and we took 1 times x to get x, and then 30 times the sine of 32.5. Type that in your calculator, and this is the height. So, and you might want to write in your notes that altitude is your height. That's what that word means. So if I'm looking for height, that wouldn't be this side. Height would be the distance from the airplane down to the ground, which would be a vertical distance. Okay, so let's do one more question. We're going to skip 4 because that has a lot of steps and we don't have time to really work through that one. Let's go to 5. Go ahead and read that and see if you can draw your diagram. I think that's the hardest part of word problems. So take a minute to read question 5. So the airplane in relationship to the airport It's 15 miles from the airport at a bearing of, so it's northwest from the airport. So northwest. And they gave us the bearing. So remember from yesterday, a bearing is always made with the vertical. So we know that this can't be a bearing because that's my right angle. So am I going to put that bearing here where the airplane is, or do I put the bearing here? Where does that bearing go? Right here, yeah. So this is where that 62 degrees is going to go. And because it says it's 15 miles at a bearing, this 15 miles is going to be my hypotenuse. But it's asking us how far, exactly how far due west. So due west would be, I'm going to call that X, or maybe I'll call it W. That makes sense. So we got to find W. And we also need to figure out how far it is due north, and we'll call that N. So you need to solve this for W and for N. So you need to use two different trig ratios. So go ahead and start by solving for W. So we know the hypotenuse. Is W opposite or adjacent? Opposite. So what ratio are you going to use to find the west? Sine. And then what ratio are you going to use to figure out how far due north? Cosine. All right, go ahead and set up your two ratios. And solve for due west and for due north. All right, who got those answers for question 5? All right, I know I said that was our last question, but I lied. Let's do number 6. That's our last one, though, for real. No, but for real, though. 6 is it. So let's go ahead and read 6. 6 we did yesterday. We did a question like 6. I'm not saying that you do have a skills check this week. I'm not saying that. But if it did happen, you might want to know how to do questions like number 6. Okay? So go ahead and read number 6. See if you can set it up based on what we started yesterday. And then we will go through it, and then that's it. So, of course, if it says north or south, that's always vertical. And then east or west is horizontal. And the plane is here. So our bearing that we're trying to find is this angle right at the top. So see if you can figure out what that angle is figuring out what ratio. Are we going to take the inverse sine, inverse cosine, or inverse tangent? Whenever you're looking for an angle, angles are inverses. So 45 is opposite, 65 is adjacent. So theta equals the inverse tangent of opposite over adjacent. Type that in your calculators. And you should get that theta is 34.695 degrees. But remember, with the bearing, you have to include directions. And it's always opposite. So what am I going to put on this side? Is this going to say north or south? South, because it's opposite the direction that we flew. So we have south. And then what's on the other side, east or west? East. And that would be your final answer.